everyone, and thank you for joining us for this discussion on the new era of Great British Philanthropy and what the next generation might bring. Here to discuss this fascinating topic with me are Sarah, Duchess of York, who has been a philanthropist for over 30 years and champions a huge number of causes, some of which we'll speak about later, with a focus on children, education, young people, and cancer. Amy Dorfman, a second-generation British philanthropist and trustee of the family's charitable foundation, which was established by her father, Sir Lloyd Dorfman. She serves on the board of JW3, a Jewish community centre and arts venue in London, and was a board member for the TikTok Club at Great Ormond Street Hospital. Her professional background is in marketing in the corporate sector. Ashling Cashmore, Head of Impact and Advisory at Charities Aid Foundation, and Nicola Johnson, Chief Customer Officer at Stewardship. Please join me in welcoming our panellists.
And who are you?
And thank you so much.
Not at all.
And I am Stephanie Bridger-Linning, a journalist, and I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Good for you.
Thank you. Well, now I'm feeling buoyant. Ashling, perhaps you could start by setting the scene for us. I know Charities Aid Foundation carries out extensive research regarding the state of British philanthropy. Where are we now? Is there a decline in the number of people giving, as some headlines suggest?
So I actually must admit I feel a little bit guilty starting on a negative note because I don't think it's ever a nice way to start a panel, and I do really want to preface the fact that there is really a dynamic ecosystem in the UK. But I think that, you know, it would be remiss to say, if I didn't say that we are in a bit of a crisis when it comes to philanthropy in the UK, and we really are seeing a decline in giving. I think at the moment, in terms of the research that we've done, we're looking at about only a half people in the UK are actually giving and have donated to a charity in the last year. And then when you look at young people, the figure goes down even more, and you're looking at about a third of young people are giving regularly. And I think when you think about the context that we're living in, you know, you think about the cost of living crisis, you think about there's a real rising demand on charities and, you know, people needing their services. But obviously they have less money and there's less money to go around. So, you know, and I speak to charity leaders a lot. And also I think even just looking through a LinkedIn feed, you see the challenges that they're facing, the difficult decisions charities are having to make on who they can serve, shutting down services, and in some cases actually shutting down completely. So a lot of what we really try to do at Charities Aid Foundation is encouraging people to give, and given we're talking about philanthropy today, you know, it is really that mantle on which we're basing ourselves. We did a bit of research recently on high net worth giving, and we looked at the amount that high net worth people across the UK are giving, and I think that's coming out at about just under 8 billion a year, which is 0.4% of their investable assets. And what we're really trying to call for is that high net worth individuals across the UK consider giving up to 1% of their investable assets, which really would unleash about 12 billion more for charities and really make the difference, I think, in the sector and tackling some of those key problems that we have.
And something that we'll touch upon later, I'm sure, is the role that wealth managers have to play and how there's a whole ecosystem of people who can help us hit that marker. Nicola, in terms of what Stewardship is seeing, do you have a similar assessment of where we are at the moment?
Thanks. I mean, Stewardship does have a slightly different perspective on this. So we've got our generosity report for 2025 that we've recently published, which showed that actually giving for the subsection we're looking at was actually up from the previous year, with people giving on average 5% in regular giving. And what I think is quite interesting, of course, we're looking at a sort of a smaller subsection there. We're looking particularly at people with a Christian faith. But I think what it does help to show is that faith is often a strong motivator for giving. And I think that data also plays out in other faiths as well. And I think, in fact, previous reports from CAF have showed that link. So I think it's sort of quite an interesting thing to sort of understand the things that do motivate and drive people. And one of the other pieces of information that came from our data was that actually donors experience or seem to experience more joy in their giving when they are more sort of regularly active in their faith, which was quite an interesting finding too.
Thank you, and we'll touch upon other motivators for giving and why we give. Amy, I know you have two hats that you wear. You're a fundraiser and a philanthropist. What's your view of the state of UK philanthropy on the ground?
So it's an interesting question. I think it's probably best answered actually with my fundraising hat on. We have over 100,000 very worthy charities in the UK. And I think it's, we should recognise that there are some very generous philanthropists doing some really great, fantastic work. And also over millions of volunteers that we have. Every year we just recently had, I think, 50,000 running the marathon. But fundraising is not easy at the moment from a charity's perspective. I think, as we've just heard, with the exiting of non-DOMs from the UK, financial instability, it's not been an easy time. I think traditionally charities have looked to the older generation for the big donations. And that's, we're still seeing that, but I think that the younger generation, whilst they still want to give and still are very concerned and from social issues, and many do give financially as well, as you said, that there is a decline, and it's perhaps getting the younger generation and bridging that gap between the younger and the older.
Mm-hmm. And before we come on to talk about the next gen, Duchess, I know that you have been a philanthropist, for many decades now, and the charities that you focused on, in particular cancer care, has recently taken on a very personal note for you. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how important personal connection is when it comes to deciding where to give.
Well, firstly, I think everyone needs to take a big, deep breath and say hi to everybody who's sitting next door to each other, because the room's very quiet and very intense. And we're talking about such a great subject that we can really make a massive change on. So let's just wake everything up a bit. I'm a professional, thank you. I'm a professional storyteller. Yes, this is Derek and this is Eric. Yes, I had a mastectomy. And the reason why I call about breast cancer, I call it a sense of tumour, is because Vicky, age 16, said, "Have you met my 3 friends?" I went, "Where are your 3 friends?" And she said, "There's Edward, Henry, and Fred." I said, "But those are your tumours." And she said, "Yes, you have to have a sense of tumour." She died, but now I'm sitting here in front of you all. You all can make a dramatic difference, and you can tell your clients and your clients and your clients. Do you know why? Because it's about the story. It's about the fact that you can, right this second, take a girl actually, out of the Taliban hold in Afghanistan, and you can get her out into another country and then put her on stage with me and say, "Niloufar, what can we do to help?" Well, what you can do to help is continue education for these women and young girls in Afghanistan through computers, through Dell computers actually. Again, bilateral relations between America and Britain really needs to be looked at. I think it's really important that youth impact and getting young people to talk. So yes, I did start the Youth Impact Council and the Youth Impact Fund. I'm a philanthropreneur. I made the word up, so look it up. But it's philanthropreneur from the heart. What does it mean? It means that in the poorest area, you can find a brilliant voice. If you show up, look, listen, learn, and amplify. From a young person, Joseph is an example on a place in Sierra Leone, on a dump. And I went up to him, he's 15. I said, "Joseph, hello." He went, "Hello, ma'am." I thought, whoa, how come you're so well educated and good manners? And he said, "Well, my name's Joseph and I'm going to be a lawyer." Hello, this is great. And what are you doing on the dump? Well, I'm collecting all the tin cans so that I can make some money so I can educate myself. We love Joseph, right? So right in this room, right this second, that's what we have to do in the UK. Rudy's Retreat. Go to Rudy's Retreat in Huddersfield. He's not very well. He has cancer, but he started a tea room, right? Then I went to the Big Give. I said, "Hello, Big Give. At Christmas, can you match funding with Lorraine Kelly? If I go on Lorraine Kelly, can you match funding, please, with Rudy's Retreat?" We did it with Prevent Cancer in Manchester. which is incredible. And we really believe in the big give, that match funding is the future. So I can give you so many solutions. I mean, you know, you want to talk about Brianna. You want to talk about Brianna in South Pacific, 21. She doesn't want her country to sink. So I went over to Samoa and said to her, Brianna, what can I do? She said, do something about the waste management in the South Pacific and then the countries won't sink. Hello, I invented a compostable diaper. You can watch that space too, because no one in the world has invented a compostable diaper. Now that's impact investment. That's where all of you can make money, because you impact, you get your revenues back through making a dramatic difference, and you can own a product, which is a compostable diaper. There you are. Does that answer it, really? Thank you, front row. We like the front row.
Well, now that we all have a bit of a... Well, I was going to say we've had a spring put in our step rather than a telling off. Now that we're all a bit G'd up, now's a good time to say that we will be, of course, accepting questions at the end, if we can do that through Slido. That's sli.do.com, and it will be hashtag Spears500Live if you have any questions to ask our panellists. So the next generation, it sounds like you meet young people around the world who are doing so much to improve the world. Do you see that same attitude among British young people?
Well, the other day, thank you for the question, by the way.
Pleasure.
Yeah, good journalist. The other day, Dan Laws, Stephanie, what is Dan Laws? What's his company called? My Life, My Say. Yeah, he's going to be a politician. He's absolute genius. He's 23. So I said to Dan, My Life, My Say is brilliant. You are going to make a dramatic difference for young people in politics. Who would you like to meet? He said, Tony Blair. I said, well, I just so happened to be going to see Tony about other things. I said, you come with me. And then when I got there, I said, you don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from Dan. He's the future. He's the person we need to amplify, give him the platform in order that he can make a difference. So, yes, I'm very excited by youth impact. I do think you're right. You are completely correct. You all are very intelligent, statistic people. I'm emotional wreck. But it's really important that I can be your loudspeaker for all of you, right? Because you're the ones who have the stats and the facts that can then back up what I'm saying. But going to this point about young people in the UK, in Great Britain, putting great back in Britain, it is possible. It is possible, and you can go to the poorest place. For example, I go a lot to Burnley. It's incredible in Burnley how many young people are wanting to make change. Some get worried about there's no food scarcity, and then they go off and plant vegetable gardens, and they want to make a difference. So I think it's a question of going on TikTok, amplification, and that's my job, from the facts that you will do the work and then feed me.
Well, I'm sure everyone is trying to amplify voices in myriad ways. Amy, I know that a personal connection was behind your decision to support the TikTok club at Great Ormond Street. Would you feel comfortable talking about that?
Yes, of course. Congratulations. Sorry about that. It's okay.
Says it's fine.
Yeah, so we talked about an importance of having a personal connection in order to have a connect. Well, so we use the word connection with a charity. My own personal story was when my son was 8. He was diagnosed with a brain tumour, and he was taken to Great Ormond Street on a Thursday. He was treated there, and actually, from the Thursday to the Wednesday when we arrived back home, a bit of a kind of a whirlwind of a week, where I actually moved house and had my daughter's 7th birthday party at the same time. It was. I have no words to express our gratitude to Great Ormond Street. Obviously, the whole family went through, a very emotional time. He is 19 now. He is absolutely fine, thank goodness, and very much an annoying 19-year-old. So that's all good.
Which is what we want.
But obviously, going through an experience like that gives you a connection to the charity. So from a foundation point of view, the family established. There is now a Dorfman surgery centre at Ormond Street. And my personal involvement was I got involved with, they call it the TikTok board, which is a fundraising part of Great Ormond Street. So it was a 2-year project to raise a significant amount of money. I think it was about 13.5 million for an IMRI and operating suite. So that was from, when you have a connection to a charity, you want to give back. And even down to the point where we talked about the building, bringing up the generations and inspiring philanthropy from the young. The year after my son was out of hospital, we were actually on holiday, and he made some friends around the pool, and they made bracelets and sold them to all the guests at the hotel and donated the money to Great Ormond Street. So I think it's important for the younger generation to have a sense of philanthropy. I think it comes from within, and it's important to pass, for me particularly, to pass that down to my children.
Well said. And we're so pleased that your son's treatment was successful.
Thank you.
Ashling and Nicola, from less of a personal point of view, what more can be done to engage the next generation of givers?
I think there's lots of things, and we probably don't have enough time to go into them, but I do think there is a fundamental point that philanthropy has a bit of a PR problem. I'm really pleased that we have 2 phenomenal female philanthropists here today, but I think often for a lot of clients that I advise, when they think about philanthropy and they think about philanthropists, they think about billionaire American males very far away, and I think it can be quite hard to see yourself in that paradigm. So a lot we really have to do is sort of breaking that down and celebrating perhaps how philanthropy is evolving and what that looks like, and perhaps it's sometimes even about removing that word philanthropy, which can put a lot of people off. So, and I think that what we're seeing much more is really, and the Duchess referenced this in terms of impact investing, social investment. There are lots of ways in which we can drive positive change in society. And I do think that is something that young people are leaning into much more. So whilst, I cited the fact that only 1/3 of young people are giving regularly, actually, when I think about my clients, the millennials, the Gen Z that I've spoken to, they are actually thinking about different ways in which they can drive positive change. And for them, it's no longer as the previous generation where they saw investing on one hand and giving on the other. There is this, it's much more of a murky line. And I think I will always remember one client that said to me, and this goes to the point about wealth advisors, because I think that they often feel that their advisors are not there to support them as they would like in terms of broaching this. He said, my advisors are there to really think about the impact the world is having on my assets. And I want them to think about the impact my assets are having on the world. And I think that is the mindset shift that we need to start thinking about. And I think if you can grab onto that, you can really help young people give more.
What do you think is stopping wealth advisors from having that mindset switch?
It's confidence. So I in a previous life used to work in a French private bank, and I think a lot of as a philanthropy advisor, and a lot of the clients that were coming to me were referred by a very small group of relationship managers. And that wasn't because their client base happened to be more philanthropic. It was because those relationship managers had understood how to broach the subject of philanthropy with their clients. It's normal. If you don't feel confident talking about something, you will avoid it. And we've even done research that shows only 5% of wealth advisors actually feel confident talking to their clients about philanthropy. But the clients really want to talk about it. They see that as part of a holistic view of their wealth, and they're dying for that. So I think we would really encourage more education to help wealth advisors get that confidence. And there's a lot that we're advocating in terms of it being included in the CPD, etc. But I think it's really about building that confidence.
And Nicola, do you see a particular desire from younger philanthropists or would-be philanthropists to have that additional support? Do you think there's a different mentality from the older generations maybe?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's quite interesting from the report, the data from our generosity report did actually show a slightly different trend with young Christian philanthropists who are sort of in the youngest category of 18 to 24, who are proportionately actually giving the most at 11%. So that was quite an encouraging picture for that subset. But I think I'd agree with what's been said in terms of that more holistic approach, or the next gen are looking for an understanding of their values to be incorporated across the philanthropy and all of their wealth management space. And I think there is a desire to be heard and understood in that space by their advisors as well, to understand what that looks like. And similarly, to what you were saying, the social impact investing, yes, we're seeing that increase, but again, we're seeing people actively choose to divest from things that are causing harm, environmental and other examples as well. So I think there absolutely is that desire to be supported in that space, to understand that whole picture of giving. It's no longer separated. It's much more of a holistic picture. And how do we do that in a way that honours the values of that individual, or perhaps their family as well?
And perhaps now's a good time if all of our panellists could discuss, is there a strategy that you have seen in being particularly effective in terms of getting the right money to the right people? I know, Duchess, you spoke about the big give and match funding. Would you mind speaking a little bit more about how you've seen that implemented?
I think young people, and especially young people, because I love young people, they're just great. Your 19-year-old son, we love him, don't we? Want to make the planet better for him. And I think that if they think they're giving their £5 and it's matched, it feels really exciting. It's like an investment. It's like a really interesting way to learn about money. And I talked to Philly today, and Philly Financials, she said 0 to 7 is when the child really wants to understand and learn about how to money and maths and finances and all that. And after that, you go into trauma if you're not looked after at that early young age. Well, I literally can't do maths because the teacher annoyed me. And so therefore I think it's really important that that people don't go through what I went through, and that we listen, and I think human contact, communication. The village hall in World War II was the place everyone went to have a chat and a cup of tea and a biscuit. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to communication through human contact and through asking, how are you?
Thank you so much for that. And Amy, I know you've found the personal connection, the human connection, a really important part of your fundraising also. Is that right?
Yes, it really has been. In terms of a good example, the Duchess was just saying about match funding, and just building on that was something that we actually did at JW3, which was kind of initiated when we had to start thinking outside of the box. During COVID, when there was no longer the in-person ability to do, the fundraising, all the big fundraising events. So this was a more crowdfunding, but with the doubling element. So in essence, you have 100 champions. So it works within a community, and those 100 people would send out to 20 of their contacts, etc. And people really do tend to give to people. So it was very much based on a smaller donation. And as you said, there's something special about knowing that your donation is being doubled. And it kind of went viral, which really was a very interesting and very successful way to fundraise.
And heartwarming. We're all actually, trying to do the right thing often. We just don't know how.
And what's quite nice as well is that people feel part of the community when they were donating. You feel part of the charity, and it's about nurturing relationships and really building on that.
And Ashling, is there a strategy you'd like to highlight?
Well, firstly, I would just say it's important to have a strategy, and that's definitely with my advisory hat on. I think it's something that we see a lot of people actually skip, and it really is so crucial to actually have that strategy before you start launching into anything, because I think that's where you're going to miss effectiveness and actually seeing the impact of what you're doing. I've seen so many clients who feel a bit adrift and a bit overwhelmed by the sector, by the extent of the problems. And I think given that all of your clients will have limited resources, there is a real need to focus. So that strategy is really key. I think that the thing that I wanted to highlight, and sorry for that slight
No,
little,
it's important.
the thing that I really wanted to highlight is, what we encourage a lot of our clients to do is really that focus on trust-based philanthropy, and that is trusting the organizations that you're working in, that they are the experts, and what you really need to give them is the freedom to be able to do what they need to do to drive the impact. And so I think what we really try and work with clients on is establishing those trusting relationships, giving those charities the freedom, but also helping the clients think about how can we ensure this organization is going to thrive. And so a lot of the work we do is around resilience, and it's really trying to build the resilience of these organizations because they are confronted with, when you think about the last few years, we've had COVID, we've had the cost of living crisis. They really are confronted by a number of challenges. So a lot of our work is trying to think about how can we help those organizations weather the storm. And if you trust those organizations and you believe in the impact that they're having, then you really should be investing in them as an organization so that they can thrive and continue to do their great work, but allow them to do it.
Thank you. And Nicola?
Thanks. Yeah, so for us, whilst the donor-advised fund model, which we operate, is often more flexible and efficient, there is a bit of a gap there in terms of support from what would be a board of trustees. So we developed a new idea called the Donor Advisory Board model a couple of years ago, and that allows philanthropists to bring alongside them trusted peers, trusted other philanthropists in the space, advisors, into a setting that allows them to help in that sort of grant-making process, the decision-making process. And what we found there is that collaboration and that bringing people together and really that opportunity and space to build relationship meaningfully has been really effective. And what we've seen recently is that donors who have taken up that donor advisory board service have increased their grants out by 100% in the first year of giving. And so for us, that's been a really key strategy, and it's really based on that relational element, getting alongside people, understanding what are your values, what are you trying to achieve, how can we help you, how can we challenge you, and what are the voices we can bring into that to help make effective decisions in that space.
Continuing on how important people are in this, well, of course, we're all people, but the relationships are. Do philanthropists need to be speaking more about the money that they give? Do we need more vocal proponents saying, I dedicate my time to doing this, to sort of break the idea that we have of the distant, US billionaire who's sitting behind his big mahogany desk and clicking some buttons and then somehow a wing pops up?
Personally, I believe so. Generosity is contagious. The more we talk about it, the more we do it, the more we do it, the more we talk about it. And there are statistics to prove that people in community give more and give together and they give more. And so I think the more we hear about it, the more people understand innovative ideas and how to do it well. I think that is one of the keys to unlocking more generosity.
Duchess, do you spend your time, encouraging your friends and peers to speak more about the philanthropy that they're doing?
I think it's really difficult. I think it's really difficult. You were saying it's difficult fundraising. I think it's really, really difficult. So
and
we
time
have
consuming.
Yeah, well, time consuming I don't mind because I want Rudy to be okay, right? But I think it's really difficult to get people to wake up to that. It's really cool to see a young teenager ringing the bell at the Teenage Cancer Trust, isn't it? And when you see these extraordinary people, when I go around Teenage Cancer Trust last week, I took my girls as their 18th birthday present because I thought they needed to learn about humility. And when they were 18, they're not 18 now. But when I went into the room, I saw this girl and she said, "Oh, I'm a football player and I'm a goalkeeper and I'm 15 and I think they're cutting my leg off. But I'm okay." I just went, "Sarah, when are you ever going to just stop, shut up, and realize how lucky you are?" So I think that a lot of you talked about that, about being incredibly generous with your time and energy. But I think it's time, because we've got to make it better for your children and for my grandchildren. We've got to make it better. So yes, it is time. And if people get annoyed with me, well. Daily Mail does every day, so it's no different. But I always say, when when I'm up on stage, I always say thank you to the British media because I'm notorious. So now, standing here, I can get my little friend Rudy and Nilüfer and all my little friends out to you out there. So they're here today. They've got a voice. They've been heard. And so I thank the British media for putting me here. I really do. It's pretty tough, but it's pretty good because you're listening.
Absolutely. Everyone is listening.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Amy, did you want to add something there?
Just to reiterate, I think it's so important to talk about it, and so important to talk about the good work that's being done, because I do feel like the younger generation need role models.
Yeah.
And the importance of a role model to look up to aspire to, and to follow in the path of.
And particularly if, you know, you're from a family of means where you can make a significant impact on the world, to grow up, you mentioned the word humility, to understand that you're in a position of privilege and you can use your platform by virtue of how you were born to the benefit of others is really important. Is that something that you see clients bringing in their children from a young age? I think the Duchess mentioned 0 to 7 in terms of the window. Of course, I'm sure people aren't bringing their infants to family meetings, but teenagers and young adults.
I think a lot of clients appreciate the power that philanthropy has to transmit values to the next generation. You know, I've seen a lot of clients that are really worried, you know, and often this can be families that have recently had a liquidity event or, you know, have a recent wealth holders, and they're really concerned about the impact that that wealth is going to have on their children, skewing their life vision, etc. And I think that philanthropy is a really great way to create cohesion in the family, to teach them about certain values, to help them understand the, you know, the lucky position they're in, but also bringing the family together around a project. I mean, what's more wonderful than thinking about a philanthropic project that you can embark on together? You can really bring those family values to life and engage everyone. And I think the importance of, you know, talking about younger children, there is a real importance to engaging those children early on. And, you know, I've seen it with clients in the past where they wanted to create their own philanthropic structure and their own philanthropic project, and did it without their children feeding in, and then expected their children to engage with that project at a later point. Whereas I think if you have that opportunity to bring your children in from the get-go, to really understand what their ideas are, you will actually see much more engagement in that philanthropy, because you've done it together, and you might be surprised by what your children are interested in compared to what you think they might be. And that can be a source for healthy debate and discussion in the family.
Absolutely. Amy, is that something you're seeing with your children coming together around philanthropic projects?
Absolutely. I mean, from my own personal experience, me and I have a sister and a brother, and we were very much engaged with the foundation from its inception. And I think, like you said, it's a way of, you know, making the family, bringing the family together to make decisions, but also understand, you know, that you are there and you can make a difference. So it is extremely important, and it's something that I'm fully intending on passing down and bringing in my own children to help make these decisions. Absolutely, legacy.
Thank you so much. I'd like to open the floor to questions, if anyone has any. Edwin.
It's actually for Ashling. You mentioned earlier that a lot of wealth managers felt reluctant or not confident enough to bring up the prospect of philanthropy with their clients. What's the best way for them to develop that confidence?
Come and talk to me. No. I see. On a serious note, seeking out experts who can give you a bit of training and help you understand. But I also think I would just emphasize, you don't need to be an expert to talk to your clients about philanthropy, because you can then find experts who can guide them. But I would just encourage you to be curious, to ask your client the question: do you give? If you do, how's that going? Are you enjoying it? Do you, and just engage in that conversation. You don't have to be providing them with the solutions, but I think that what I think is so phenomenal and so powerful about philanthropy, and I've seen this with clients in the past. I remember once talking to a private banker who was saying, I only ever see my client for 5 minutes every time we have a meeting, because he just comes in, he signs the papers and he leaves, because he delegates most of the decisions and we do it over email. Whereas the client actually mentioned that he was interested in philanthropy, so we set up a meeting and we ended up spending 2.5 hours in a room with his client. And it opened his eyes to his client's values, to his drivers, to what was worrying him at that time, his family. And he gathered so much information about his client and how to serve him better, all through the power of just a very open conversation about philanthropy. So I would say definitely seek out experts, on the Charities Aid Foundation website. We have lots of resources that people could use in terms of broaching that subject with their clients. But just be curious. You don't have to be an expert. Your client isn't expecting that from you. But what they are expecting you is to ask them the question and to think about how they can align their wealth with their values. And I think if you're not doing that, you're really missing a trick.
I was going to say, for anyone looking to build their business, when you have something like philanthropy that ties you together, something more, of substance and something that is more closely aligned to your values, do you see that it leads to longer, more fulfilling relationships with financial advisors who can key into this area?
I would say it does. I'm sorry, I don't know. I would say it does. I don't have any stats particularly on that, but I do. But, from having spent a lot of time as a philanthropy advisor in a private bank, it certainly helped the stickiness of our clients. It really created a real loyalty from the clients, who really appreciated the fact that their bank was providing this service to them, and often resulted in net new cash. They brought more assets to the bank because they loved the way that we were approaching their wealth.
And Nicola?
Yeah, and just on the other side of that as well, I think we're hearing about more examples, both in the UK context and with our US partners, whereby emerging generations of philanthropists are actually sort of sacking wealth advisors that have been with their family advising them for many, many generations, simply because they're not taking account of their views on philanthropy, and they're not taking that into account when they're looking at their portfolio. So I think it's really, really important, and I think it's actually vital that financial advisors start to look at this. You may already have seen a few months ago, the FT published an article on the opportunity for growth for advisors to sort of learn more about philanthropy. And in their pro bono economics, found that 88% of young wealthy philanthropists are already giving to charity. And of those surveyed, half of those under 35 seek out a financial advisor specifically who had philanthropic advice or was able to give philanthropic advice. So I think it's really, really vitally important.
Thank you very much. We have another question here in the centre of the room.
Hello. I just wondered what more, if anything, the charity sector can do to support high net worth individuals and wealth advisors.
Sorry?
Is that directed at anybody?
We can open it to would you be interested in hearing from any
Who would you like
panellist?
to answer that question?
I feel like you're itching.
Well, I'm itching to learn more
just the
about
microphone.
AI and how AI is going to help them.
Microphone.
Thank you. I'm very interested in AI and how AI can really, actual intelligence can actually help wealth managers and help people to get the data and find quicker ways to give. Is this correct? Sort of. Yeah. Okay. And the second thing, so I'm just learning about it because Beatrice is teaching me all about it. But the second thing is, I think it's really important that it's not just that charity thing. And I think it's really important it's not just that philanthropic thing. I think this is essential for the future of our planet. Okay, so hold that thought. But I also think that just by talking and communicating and not just sort of labeling it, it's really what kindness should be from the heart. And kindness should be in education, and it should be taught at schools from a very early age to just be kind. And I was talking to James about the big give and the match funding. Children's literacy in this country, 1 in 12 child doesn't know how to work a book because they do this, they swipe. Right? So how can you possibly say that the future of this country, if the 1 in 12 child doesn't know how to read a book? So we've got to go to basics, and that's where I talk about 0 to 7. So I also want you to know that Sarah's Trust, yes, this is luckily my CEO is called Sarah, so it's fine. I'm not plugging myself, but Sarah's Trust, 100% of the money donated goes to the child. And I and Sarah go into the field to check where your money goes. I do think that's a very important thing, that you must make sure that the money goes directly to where the person thinks it's going. And you have proof of funds. I think that's essential.
That actually ties into a question that we received on Slido, which this person speculates whether lack of transparency and issues around governance, whether that puts people off from giving, and what can be done around that.
I think this is quite a knotty issue, and I think it's something that I see with a lot of clients. There's this sort of, in some ways, a real hesitancy about where can I put my money, because I'm not sure who to trust, and I want to make sure that it's having impact and that it goes to the beneficiaries that I want. I do think that there's a bit of a difficulty in there, because I think there's a bit of a misconception about actually how charity works and the importance of charities of having overheads and being able to invest in themselves as organisations. A volunteer charity is all well and good, and it's wonderful, but actually, if you were opening a bank account, you want that to be run by an expert, you want that to be run by a professional, and it's the same with charity. If we want to have the most impact for whoever the beneficiaries are, whether that's children, whether that's in medical research, you want the best people, you want the most expert people really working to ensure that impact is happening, and checking whether it's not happening or not. And I think so there is a real need to invest in charity overheads to allow them to actually operate. And I do think that, unfortunately, we've got into a little bit of a system where we're thinking about percentage that goes on overheads, and it's not really helpful, in the sense that every charity runs differently, and there is no magic number of how much should be put into overheads. It really is variable depending on the work that the charity is doing. So, sorry, that's just my...
No, that's right. Nicola, do you have something to add?
I was just going to agree with that, actually. I think there's a bit of a fear around sort of unrestricted giving and what that could mean, but I just 100% agree that that's important. The other thing I was going to say, sort of perhaps linking those 2 points really, is something that we've seen that's quite effective for charities is sort of convening fairly small groups, to your point, Duchess, originally around that kind of sense of community. Convening small groups of charities who are doing similar things in a sector, and then inviting philanthropists and perhaps their advisors into that space to hear more about collectively what those charities are doing, because what that does in the intimate spaces is enables those philanthropists to ask some of those thorny questions directly of the charities, and the charities to really understand what are philanthropists looking for, what's really important that they need to understand about how we operate, where we're spending funds. So I think there's something there as well around that sense of community and connection and sort of deeper relationship too.
Absolutely. And I think, Ashling, you touched upon the fact that young people might not be giving as much money, but they're giving their time and expertise and giving to charities in other ways. Do you think that's as valuable for these organisations?
We often talk about the 3 T's, so time, talent, and treasure, so your treasure being your money, but obviously there is a lot more that we can offer, and I think we should be valuing that as well. The Duchess talked about the voice and being able to promote things and visibility, which really has a value in itself. I think everybody can assess what they can add, what they can bring. And, for charities, opening up your address book, your network, providing your expertise, whether they need expertise in marketing and communications, that sometimes can be as valuable as providing them with funds. So I do think, we need to have a much more inclusive view of what charities can need. But the one thing I would say is ask the charity what they need. Go and talk to them. Just ask them what they need. Don't assume, don't make any assumptions. But I think, you might be surprised and you might have something that you can offer to them.
That's great. Unless there are any other closing remarks, one final message for the wealth advisors in this room, perhaps, Duchess?
I remembered to now. just to say, when you walk out of this room and you're rushing to your next meeting, and you just have a split second, just stop and think that right this very second a child will be diagnosed with cancer, or there is a child in the Ukraine that's just lost their parents, or whatever it might be, but stop and think. My nugget for you is you can make a difference, so it's time that you do. And following up, Nicola, from your point, last week, I think that the King was brilliant when he pulled in 415 cancer charities into one room, and he got them all talking to each other. And I thought it was fantastic, because I, luckily enough, was there, and I learnt about the Western Isles and how the ladies suffering from cancer in the Western Isles, everybody's forgotten about them. And so if we can just amplify their voices of uniting what they need, and a little bit of love and care. So yes, 100% unity, community, back to the village hall.
Well, I think that's a very positive note to end on. If you could please join me in thanking our panellists and thank me.